Hey, my name is Dr. Sean Price, Clinical Coordinator here at The Fix. This is our metabolic series of our three-pronged approach that we talk about in our functional therapy system that we use here at The Fix. Remember, we look at the metabolic aspects of your health, we look at the neurological aspects of your health, and we look at the structural aspect of your health. And this video series specifically, we're talking specifically about the metabolic aspect. So far, we've talked about the thyroid gland, we've talked about the breakdowns that can happen in the thyroid pathway. We've talked about blood sugar and how it is a deal breaker, how it is involved in inflammation, cholesterol levels, and overall metabolic stressors. Today we're going to talk about the adrenal glands, okay? And we're going to cover some pretty clear issues with that. So what are the adrenal glands? Well, the adrenal glands are our fight or flight response, okay? So our nervous system, our central nervous system, is broken down into the voluntary nervous system and the autonomic. So you can look at the voluntary nervous system as being the system that we control. Like I want to write, so I'm consciously controlling this process. The autonomic nervous system is the things that we don't control. So it's like perspiration, respiration, heart rate, all these different things. Autonomic nervous system is split into the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. If one of these is firing high, the other one is suppressed. They never completely shut down, but they counterbalance each other, okay? So the adrenal glands, that is our sympathetic nervous system or our fight or flight system, okay? The parasympathetic is our feed and breed. So this has to do with digestion, it has to do with reproduction, it has to do with healing. It's our calming and our overall healing mechanisms of the body. So sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. So you're walking in the woods, you see a bear, the bear sees you and the bear charges, okay? The first thing that happens is your digestion shuts down because if sympathetic goes up, parasympathetic goes down. So your digestion shuts down, all the blood leaves the digestive system, goes out to the muscles, your hair stands up, your pupils dilate, your heart rate starts increasing, you might start sweating a little bit. Your blood glucose will increase because you have to have the fuel to carry out this pathway. So remember we talked about blood sugar and we talked about how it has this normal process. Well, if you get a sympathetic response, blood sugar is going to increase because it needs to fuel that response. So blood sugar is increased and your body gets ready to fight that bear or to run from it. So the way that looks physiologically is your hypothalamus recognizes a stressor, stimulates the pituitary gland, which then stimulates the adrenal gland, and the adrenal glands release norepinephrine, epinephrine, and cortisol. Okay? So that's the way this looks. So norepinephrine, epinephrine are released, cortisol is released, blood sugar goes up. All right? You fight this bear. You run from the bear. You find a cave. You hide from it. You escape the bear. So when this happens, the feedback mechanism to the hypothalamus just had, like we had one from the thyroid to the hypothalamus, when these hormones are released, that sends a negative feedback to the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus stops making norepinephrine, epinephrine, and cortisol. So you go back to a normal state and you're back into a balanced situation. So that's the way life is supposed to happen. You have a stress response, bear's coming at you, you fight or run, you survive, and everything goes back into balance, and your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system go back into balance, and your digestion returns, reproduction returns, and everything is fine. Now, our society is a little bit different than that. So let's say that you get up in the morning and you kiss your family goodbye and you go to work and you walk in and on your desk is a stack of paperwork that you just really don't want to deal with. Well, that's a stressor. So when that stressor comes, you get this stress response. It's the exact same thing as if that bear was coming. Physiologically, you get that stressor. So you have epinephrine and norepinephrine are released. Those are your fast-acting adrenal hormones, and then cortisol is released, and it is more of your slow-acting adrenal hormone. So that's released, you start dealing with the paperwork, your hormones start to go down, you don't really have a physical response, but they just kind of start to wear off because you've let them go. Well, then your coworker comes in and they give you another stress responder, they give you more paperwork. So you have norepinephrine and epinephrine, and then cortisol is released again. And then it happens again, and you start getting into this chronic state of hyperadrenalism. So what ends up happening is you end up having increased adrenal function increased cortisol, because your cortisol never gets to that resting level. This becomes your resting cortisol level because it never goes all the way down to zero. So you can see how that cortisol level starts to rise. So when that cortisol level is staying constantly high, well, your blood glucose is going to stay constantly high as well. So a couple things to consider there. Number one, you're having hyperadrenal responses. So you're agitated all the time, you're irritable all the time, you're having issues with that. Your blood sugar is staying high, which is going to cause that hyper blood sugar response in the body, or insulin resistance response. So then you get down regulations of your cells. So you can actually create blood sugar dysregulation because of chronic stress. Okay, that's one thing to consider. Number two, if your blood sugar goes up because of diet, the same thing happens here and your adrenal function goes up. So diet can cause this stress response just like this stress response can cause diet. So that you have to figure out which one of those things came first. The other thing that happens is if you have high cortisol and you have high blood sugar, that's going to suppress thyroid function, because you cannot have high blood sugar and high cortisol and high thyroid. Your body would go into metabolic overload and you would have a heart attack. So you cannot do that. So this can actually cause hypothyroidism. So you can have chronic stress and elevated blood sugar, or elevated blood sugar and chronic stress, which can cause decreased thyroid output, which would mimic hypothyroidism, which can also put you into this pattern where you're getting decreased metabolic output here. And what ends up happening is you start going into this this state of hypothyroidism, sympathetic dominance, because now when this is going on, your sympathetic system is always firing. And when that's always firing, that means that this is always going to be suppressed, which means that your digestive tract is not going to work properly, which is going to lead to underconversion, leaky gut syndrome, so on and so forth. So these all fit in with each other, so intertwined with each other, that you go in with a hypothyroid diagnosis or a diabetes diagnosis and you get put on thyroid medication or metformin or something like that. And that's handling one aspect to try to fix a lab, but it's not handling all of this and it's not fixing all of this. Okay, so this is very, very, very important. Now, one of the big questions that I get from patients is, what happens when we get into a situation where we have so much stress in our lives that we can't remove the stressors, so we can't fix this? Well, that's not the case, and I'm going to go into that in the next video. We're going to talk about sympathetic dominance and what you can do about that, even if you still have those stressors in your life. But I want to finish this out first. So first we have the HP axis, which is going down here, hyperadrenal, which is where we are right now, all the hormones that are released. You have your epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. Now, if this goes on for too long, eventually your adrenal glands will start to wear out and they'll start to fatigue. Now, if the adrenal glands start to wear out and they start to fatigue, then what's going to end up happening is you're going to have, instead of this kind of a hormone response, your body's not going to be able to respond and handle stress. So instead of having those high impulses of epinephrine and norepinephrine, you're going to have these small impulses and small influx of cortisol. So basically all of your adrenal hormones at this point are going to be really, really low, which means that your body's not going to be physiologically able to handle stressors. So if you get stressed out and your body shuts down, that's adrenal fatigue. If you have some kind of an emotional stressor that comes on, a family member dies, or relationship troubles or financial troubles or something like that, your body shuts down. If you decide that you want to start exercising and doing things that are good for your body, in the short term, those are stressors. In the long term, they're good for you, but in the short term, they're stressors. And if you overdo it, put too much stress on your body in that form, your body's going to shut down. So adrenal fatigue is very, very critical in healing, okay? And that we find that a whole lot with a whole lot of patients. So once you get into the hypoadrenal issue, then you've got that challenge going as well. On top of that, when that goes down, that's going to further, when adrenal function goes down, that will eventually further pull blood sugar down, so that's going to feed into hypoglycemia. Then on top of that, the thyroid is going to have to be forced to kick up and try to make up for it, but your thyroid gland is probably probably weakened from being suppressed for so long that it's not able to carry that. So now you've got hypothyroidism, you've got adrenal fatigue, and you've got blood sugar dysregulation, and they are all intertwined with each other, okay? So we've already talked about how the thyroid and the blood sugar help each other. Now, this next video, we're going to get into hormone issues because of the adrenal glands, and then we're going to get into sympathetic dominance. I forgot to put that on here. So we'll do hormone issues on the next video, and then the video after that we're going to get into sympathetic dominance, which is where I'll answer, how do you handle stress if you can't remove the stressor from your body? Okay, so we'll see you on the next video.